2c-e it's a psychedelic phenethylamine, and it's part of Shulgin's magical half dozen, which include mescaline, 2c-b, which I both tried, so now 2c-e, so now I'm halfway through his half dozen. And then the other ones are DOM, which is also known as STP, which I'm hoping to get into at some point, 2c-t2, and 2c-t7. So with the exception of mescaline and 2c-b, most of these are very hard to find. I was fortunate enough where a guy I had been talking to, just a fellow psychonaut, told me he had had some from years ago. So he sent me a 25 milligram capsule of it. I sat on it for maybe 2 or 3 months just waiting for the best night to do it, because what I read on it was that the dosing was very variable. So some people would take 10 and have a mind-blowing experience. Some people would go up to about 20. So it fell in that range of 10 to 20, with 10 being underwhelming for some, overwhelming for others, 20 being a magical spot, whereas 20 being terrifying for others. So I was, and the also thing I kept coming back to was it lasts like 12 hours. So I was waiting for the perfect day, waiting for the weather to be right, waiting for like the wife and kids to not have anything to need me for 12 hours. And that finally lined up this last Saturday night. So after I like cracked the capsule open and tested a little bit, just to make sure it was what the guy told me it was, just out of, I was like, if this guy scrambled up his drug stash 10 years ago, I have no idea. It's just a blank cap. So I tested it. It was 2c-e. And then I had maybe like 18 milligrams left. It was caked in there. It had been sitting for a while. So I ended up with a 12 milligram dose that I decided on. I said, you know what? I'm going to take 12. If it's underwhelming, so be it. It might be overwhelming. We'll see what happens. So about 7:45 at night, I took the 12 milligrams. And it took about an hour for me to notice anything. And at first I started getting like, kind of like tingly and like pins and needle type feeling and like a weird alertness. And like this, just this sense of like something was coming. So I battened down the hatches, told the wife good night, got my blankets, got some incense, got my headphones, went out to the hammock and started setting myself out in the hammock. And I got washed over with this like, kind of like an MDMA type like sense of calmness, but it was very gentle. And I was like, oh fuck, okay, so that's all this is. Maybe 12 milligrams was kind of low, but like, I could deal with this. This will be nice. So I sat down, and then it was a little cold. So I was like, I'm going to go get one more blanket because I think I'm going to be out here for a while. And when I stood back up, it was as if like, it hit me like a ton of bricks. So I went from that peaceful state to like suddenly I was like, oh fuck, that's what this stuff does. And I kind of felt like like someone like strummed me like a guitar or something. I felt this like vibration shoot through my body and just kind of reverberate through my like sense of consciousness and through my visual field. So I was like stuck in this eternal moment of like, the sun was just going down, so it was just getting dark. And there was just this ripply vision through the trees that went on forever. So it was like an eternal moment of, I want to say like an MDMA type, that like MDMA swell you get? It was that, but times a million, and not directed to anyone. It was just kind of this like feeling of contentment and love and peace and just this feeling of eternity, with the same time with like a bodily vibration that was like shaking like a guitar string, but in a very pleasant way. Almost like when you hear like a perfect guitar tone, when you hear like just whatever, your favorite song, your favorite guitar solo, or if you're like 12 and you just heard Jimi Hendrix for the first time, it was like that feeling of like, just that feeling of getting washed over by music or by like just pure bliss and joy. And it went on as far as I could see. I could have stood there forever. And it was just this rippling vision and this vibrating body feeling of just perfection. So that kind of subsided, and I was like, oh fuck, what was that? Like, I'm going to walk around a little bit and like kind of try to get a feel for what's happening. So I kept getting washed over, and it would just stop me dead in my tracks every time. So it was like just this full kaleidoscopic, but like more ripply than kaleidoscopic visual field of just perfection and like peace and harmony and like just like perfect tonal vibration. I don't even know how else to describe it other than like everything lined up and was perfect for maybe 35, 40 seconds. And then it would kind of subside again. So it was just waves of that for maybe like an hour, hour and a half. It was like every 5 minutes, I would just get washed over by this feeling. And I would, after a while, I started getting just these thoughts of like, this is so perfect. I just started mapping out like all the people in my life, friends and family that I needed to bring into this and walk them through my yard and show them. And I started coming to the conclusion that like my only purpose in life was to now give people 2CE and walk them through my yard at night. So that's where I was for like an hour and a half. And I remember my wife texting me and I was still able to like kind of look at my phone. It was like, are you okay? And I was just like, I'm so okay. I can't even fucking explain it. Like, I'll talk to you in a little bit. So like that slowly subsided. I don't know how long it was, but I was literally walking around my yard and like laying in my hammock alternatively, just in utter just delight. And then eventually as that started to subside, the waves got like more emotional. So it would be like, I would get this like deep, like I laid down at this point because I was kind of getting tired. Or not even tired, I was kind of getting like a sedated type feeling. So I would like lay in the hammock and I would like rifle through my like thoughts and my memories and my emotions. And I kept coming back to this thought of like, I need to be able to think about anything that goes through my head and see it through. So like I would get a thought of like a childhood memory or like something I did in the past days or a way I acted or a way I didn't act or something. And I would think it all the way through. And as it came out of me, I would get hit with that like sheer bliss again. And I would like release that thought. And then the next one would come up. And I would take that thought almost as if I was like diving to the bottom of a deep pool. Take that thought to the bottom of the pool, completely see it through. And then as it resolved, bring it back up to the surface and just let it go again. And I did this for hours. And I went through like conversations I had with people before, ways I handled old relationships, ways I talked to my parents, ways I talked to my friends, my family. I would just go through it, see how I could do it better or different or how like I could interact with people. It'd be like very specific personal things would go all the way down to its core, think it through, and then like release it into like a sheer blissful state over and over for maybe 6 hours. I was there till the sun came up. So if it kicked in around 8:30-ish, 8:40, if it kicked in around 9, we'll say full blast, it was like a solid 7 to 8 hour shift of just like, and the thing was like the introspection was coming like the same way like a mushroom trip would come, but the whole time I was like held in like a peaceful MDMA type state. Like the kind of state you can only get from phenethylamines, where it's like everything's okay. But it wasn't like whitewashing things or softening things like MDMA. I was still getting to the core of these like introspective thoughts. And even if they were harsh, it never really hurt me. So like it kind of would just go in this cycle over and over. But unlike mushrooms, which can get uncomfortable and can get torturous, it was always like someone was holding my hand and being like, no, it's okay. Like, think this through. But then at the same time, if I closed my eyes, I was getting visuals that could only be matched with LSD. LSD holds such a special place in my heart, and I always consider it my favorite psychedelic. But like the 2CE definitely rivaled LSD, and it made me realize like it might be better. I don't know. I have a bad habit of like saying the most recent thing I did, no matter what, is the best thing ever. You know, I could go to get a sandwich somewhere and be like, this is the best roast beef sandwich around. But it's like, no, it's the most recent one you've eaten. But like LSD has this magical spot that the 2CE was able to hit. But then the 2CE was bringing in like an MDMA type feeling of love to it. And the other thing with LSD, like there's so much noise in my LSD trips. So I'll be getting these profound realizations about like the nature of consciousness and like, you know, how to move in the world and how to act. But then I'll like spend an hour thinking about like where, or, you know, there's one time I took acid and I kept having the most profound insights, but then there was this other running theme where I kept trying to figure out like where all the mass produced shit that we make in society goes. I was like tripping out on like where do all the 2023 glasses go on New Year's Day? Or like, where do all the like, where do all the Joe Biden signs go now? Like so all the shit we mass produce as a society, where does that end up the second it's not needed anymore? And I'm not saying that's a useless thought, but I'll spend an hour of my acid trip thinking about that. And I'm like, I don't need to think about that. And it'll keep coming up and coming up. And this happens every time I take acid. Whereas with the 2c-e, all of my thoughts were crystal clear. So there was no confusion. There was even times where I was having thoughts about acid trips and being like, this is the metaphorical reason why you think about that. The other cool thing was like, it never truly ended. So I was up through the night. I maybe got like 2 hours of sleep. And the next day I would just get like little mini waves of like euphoria. So I was back to like baseline sobriety. I had no drag like you would get from MDMA. I was a little tired from staying up all night, but I would just close. I could, even now it's been 4 days. And if I wanted to, I could go stand outside and close my eyes and like hit like a peaceful eternity for a second. I can see why it's on Shulgin's magical half dozen. And I'm blown away that it's not a more common, actually, I kind of know why it's not a more common psychedelic, because it's not for everyone. Like if you had taken this at a rave or taken this at a party, it would have been hell on earth. Like this is a true sit down, and like with acid, you could kind of take acid or mushrooms and like maybe make your way into a concert and kind of deal with it. The 2c, I don't think it would play nice with something like that. Like this is a lay down and deal with all your stuff, think through your stuff. Like, let's get into this. Like, you're not going to be able to walk around. You're not going to be able to do this and like hide the fact. There's no like moderate dose, in my opinion. I think this is like, once you see what this stuff does, this is like an event that you have to sign yourself up for and give it the proper format and respect. I'm super interested in researching this, like on the tier of which I researched like mushrooms and LSD. This is definitely something that I'm like, this needs to be researched further by not just me, by people I know. And like, I need to find a proper supply of this stuff somehow. It's not something I would give to anyone willy-nilly. It's not something I would recommend like going out and trying unless you're like very comfortable with like deep psychedelic exploration. Because you're signing up for 12 hours of deep introspection. I wouldn't say brutal introspection like you would get with psilocybin, but you got to be ready to like think things through and like not shy. Like I didn't shy away from any thought in my head because I was like, it would not be comfortable if I did. I just would love to know, like, because I talked to a couple other dudes that have tried it, and some of them told me like 20 is the sweet spot. And like it's so weird because like it didn't have a scary edge to it, but I could see how it would be there. And like, since I had only had 12, I kind of had a foot on the ground the whole time. But I was able to be like, I could see how this would turn into like full blown, like a problem for someone that isn't comfortable completely relinquishing the controls. I mean, it's piqued a fascination in me with the psychedelic phenylethylamines where I'm like, I kind of want to just study them from now on. It's like, I love mushrooms and I love what mushrooms have done for me, but they fucking torture me. Like every time I take mushrooms, I get fucking tortured. Whereas I feel like I was getting the same benefits from the 2c-e, but it was like a much softer, like parenting skill was being used on me, I'd say. Where like I was still getting my flaws pointed out, but I wasn't getting beaten. Like mushrooms beat me and fucking put my face in the dirt, you know? But like I'm kind of like, it also really made me question like how much of my own like beliefs and impressions I take into my psychedelic experiences. You know, whereas like I have so much emotional connection to mushrooms just from working with them so much over the last couple of years that like, even when they beat the shit out of me, I'd never be like, I shouldn't do mushrooms anymore. You know, or like acid. I have so much, like I've been fascinated with acid literally since I was in 3rd grade. I remember watching Dragnet with my parents and being like, yo, that looks fucking cool. And they were like, no, drugs are bad. And I'm like, but that looks fucking sweet. It was like an episode on like people doing acid in the 60s. And I was like, that's what I want to do. And they were just like, nah, like that's not cool. I'm like, no, that looks cool as fuck. But so like when I take acid, there's like a part of me that's like, it taps into like so much of my like cultural identity in my head. You know, so it's like smoking weed. Like I smoke weed and half of it's like the fact, like the identity of loving weed is why I'm smoking weed sometimes. You know, then you actually get stoned and you're like, do I even enjoy this? You know, it's like a very weird conundrum of like, because that was another heavy topic that came up for me was like how much of my identity is just advertising that's been programmed into me. And I was like bugging out about it where I was like, dude, so much of my self-image is shit that's been like presented to me through advertising over the last 42 years. Yes, I don't know where to place this one. I almost want to just like say it's my new favorite psychedelic and put a pin in it and be like, must be researched deeper. But then there's the whole conundrum of I don't know who the fuck to get this stuff from. So I'm praying that someone will cross my path that knows how to make this stuff. In the meantime, like it's like that magical half dozen that Shulgin put out, I'm like really going to start focusing on it over the next couple months because it's like, I mean, the guy knew what he was talking about. I thought 2CB was cool. And I thought 2CI was cooler than 2CB, but this just blows. I don't want to say it blows them out of the water because it's just so much different. You know, like there's a time and place for 2CB, there's a time and place for 2CI, but 2CE's up there with like, if you said like, yo, you're stuck on a ranch for the rest of your life with one substance, it might be 2CE. Because it kind of does what every other one does, but in its own way.